Well, it's always something. It's always something. Welcome to the emergency pod here on the PHLY Sixers podcast, live from the Xfinity mobile studio, along with Derek Kyle. I'm the reproducing. Breaking news this morning. Paul George suspended for 25 games for violating the league's anti-drug policy. And he released a statement as well where he explained the importance of mental health and taking some treatment for that mental health and all. So we'll get into all of that. We'll break it all down as we hang out with you. Sixers play the Pelicans tonight at the arena. But this is what's top of mind for everybody this morning. Kyle, right away, Sixers, again, this game about to go on the road trip, trade deadline 5 days away, and the Sixers get a big blow with this news here for their starting forward who has been playing really well and is now going to miss a big chunk of the second half of the season for this basketball team.
Devon, you said it's always something. We could have made the headline for the show and basically every show we've ever done about the Philadelphia 76ers. It's always something, and it would have made complete sense to everybody who follows the team, everybody who works for the team, everybody who's ever been associated with the team.
You know,
if we were so typical.
If we were ever starting a podcast from scratch, it's always something in Philadelphia as a nice little play on It's Always Sunny.
Keep that under your hat just in case, Derek. You never know. So look, we can
trademark it, man. Trademark it.
You mentioned it, Devon. We might as well bring up the statement that Paul said. Paul gave the statement to Shams Charania. This is a direct quote from Paul George. Said, quote, "Over the past few years, I've discussed the importance of mental health, and in the course of recently seeking treatment for an issue of my own, I made the mistake of taking an improper medication. I take full responsibility for my actions. Apologize to the Sixers, my teammates, and the Philly fans for my poor decision-making during this process. I am focused on using this time to make sure that my mind and body are in the best condition to help the team when I return." So that's direct from Shams, who got it directly from Paul George. So a lot of people were asking about what it was. People immediately, probably including some people that are not as up on the drug policy, will say, I won't name any names, thought it might be a little bit of the ganj at first, but they don't really even test for that anymore. Here's what I would say. I think what Paul's statement gives up and what I would say is just, it's reckless. It's irresponsible. It's like your whole job as a professional is to understand everything that's going into your body. I am not going to shame anyone for seeking mental health treatment. I'm going to take him at his word that that was what he was trying to do. But every single one of these guys in every single sports league gets a gigantic list of, these are all the banned substances. These are stimulants, these are depressants, these are drugs of abuse, et cetera, et cetera. You have to know with total certainty every single drug that goes into your body. And so regardless of what the reasoning is for it, this is just a massive mistake from a veteran who should know better. Like, this isn't a guy who's like first or second year in the league, happened to take something and can plead ignorance. It's total negligence on his part. And to your point, Devon, he is now ruled out until at least March 25th against Chicago. He is going to miss effectively 2 months of basketball. Now, there's an all-star break in there, so that pads it out time-wise, calendar-wise a little bit. But that is a massive chunk of the season. And you brought it up, Devon. They have a big road trip coming up here. They then come home for a couple games. They go back on the road. The March schedule is very tough. They visit a lot of East playoff teams, Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit. They go on the road. They play Denver. They have OKC at home as the last game they have to play without Paul George. And the thing is, like, whatever you think of his contract and how big of a mistake it is, and now that becomes a big conversation today in light of this, he is the only true two-way wing with no weaknesses that they have. Like, Kelly is a two-way wing for sure, but doesn't shoot like Paul does, doesn't have the same, flexibility within lineups that Paul does. So now you get to a point where Kelly is your only reliable wing, and you basically have to get good minutes from a Justin Edwards. you're probably going to have to try out a Marjan Beauchamp on the two-way deal, which some people will be excited about. But, like, you don't have many wings on this roster, in part because you're paying Paul George $50+ million a year. This is a massive problem. And by the way, this is a team that is right on the cusp of, you're only just out of play-in territory right now. I think they are better than those teams that they're ahead of that are in the play-in. But with Joel not able to play back-to-backs and with as thin as you are on the wings, this is a massive, massive mistake that could end up defining the entire season.
Huge. And Derek, before you get started, I just want to make sure everybody knows again, Paul George suspended for 25 games by the NBA for violating the league's substance policy. We are presented by Xfinity as well. All this information here. We're also with you tonight, 6:30 pregame, as the Sixers host the New Orleans Pelicans before they hit the road for 5.
You know, I have had the location in my Twitter bio as "why can't they just be normal" for about 5 years now. And honestly, the last 2 years or so, I've been like debating whether or not I should remove that, because quite frankly, they've been, outside of the injuries, they've been a relatively normal franchise. I'm glad that they reaffirm that I should keep that in there in perpetuity, because they will never, ever, ever, ever be normal. Yep. Kyle's right. This is a massive blow on a team that just doesn't have, like, forget about even the offensive contributions, and you can't forget about him. He's been a really useful offensive player. You're already at a point where you're losing the math battle on most nights, where you don't have a ton of spacing, where when you start putting in some of the people who would replace Paul George in the lineup, you lose a lot of shooting. And obviously that's highlighted by his franchise record-tying 9 3-pointer game the other night. But defensively, you just don't have very many options. And when you start looking at on-off splits on this team, there's 2 people that stand out. VJ Edgecombe, great. He's like a +3.5. Most of that comes on the defensive side. Tyrese Maxey's great. He's a +3.5 as well in that range. Most of that comes on the offensive side. There's 2 players who stand apart, and that's Paul George and that's Joel Embiid. They're both at about a +6.5 better when they're on the floor. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that he's a two-way wing and you have nobody that can replace him. And the same can be said for Joel Embiid. You just don't have real options to go to when these players are out of the lineup. And now you have to play 25 games where it's the level of competition is ramping up, where it's crucial because you don't have that sort of like built-in cushion because you've had to play so many games without your stars already. And it's going to be very, very tough. And this is going to impact, like, I wonder how this is going to impact the Sixers' plans at, quite frankly, a trade deadline that's less than a week away. And there's 2 obvious, ways that could impact it. The first of all, congratulations, Josh Harris. Needed a little bit of good news. It's a lot easier for you to duck the tax now while clearing enough room.
Boy, did he need some good news. And we're
not going to touch on anything beyond that. But
Jesus.
it's now a lot easier because they will get about $5.2 million in, I believe, basically space off of their tax sheet because of this suspension. You're now going to be able to, if you dump, let's say, Andre Drummond, you can have enough room to duck the tax and also convert Barlow and Walker. If there's no big trade in play, that could help the Sixers accomplish both of those goals. Great. Happy about that. But also it impacts their trade deadline plans because there's a lot more uncertainty. You don't know whether you can avoid the play, and you don't know how high of a seed you can get. You don't know whether they're going to be able to build the chemistry they need to make a long playoff run. It might make you a little less willing to go all in at the deadline, or at least to make moves that would increase your chances by a fraction of a percent or a couple percent. I'm wondering what the real ramifications of this is going to be on what the Sixers plans are over the next week.
No, it's huge, man. As Kyle said, and both of you talked about, that the fact that they are on the road heavy in March, and they have about 27 games, as I was trying to just glance through it there, 27 games during this time that, Kyle, you mentioned, all the way up to that Chicago game on the 25th, only 10 of which are at home. They were so heavy here at home in the first part of the season that a lot of those are going to be on the road. And while they have a better road record than the home record, they've also had Paul George in a decent amount of those games on the road. So now everything is elevated. You have to worry about, we didn't even mention, because he hasn't played and hasn't been good, Trendon Watford is going to have to be out there on the floor. He's not a defender. It's more of an offensive thing, but you have to have actual bodies to throw in that spot. Therefore, his absence. And this is just huge for them to be in the 6th spot right now, with Toronto not losing basketball games, Cleveland on a winning streak after the Sixers helped start that one, and them dropping a few games. We continue to talk about, hey, We don't know what's going to happen, but they need to just stack wins and these small losses that would happen here and there. And while they are currently 5 games over 500 right now, this is why we talk about a cushion, because it's always something in Philadelphia. And in this case, this is not going to be great for them. Now, we'll see how they respond to it. Don't feel great about it. 5 days away from the NBA trade deadline. And what does this change? We were heavy on the Giannis talk during this week because of the news and his interest in Tyrese Maxey and all of that. Well, probably throw that one out the window now and don't worry about that as much. But for the around the margin things that we look at, everything was built with him being on this basketball team and Joel missing whatever front or back of the back-to-back that they would have, and Paul George hopefully being on the floor if Joel Embiid could not. You take away some of the extra ball handling that he does, the playmaking that he does. When you guys mentioned the defense, he is also that release valve for those 2 young guys. Well, VJ Edgecombe is a young guy, where Tyrese Maxey has somebody that he can trust with the ball in his hands. And this is huge. This is absolutely big for this team right now in this spot. Look, even if it was at the beginning of the season, it's devastating because you don't want to lose 25 with one of your big 3. This is devastating for the middle of the season now, and them trying to stay within reach of those other teams while stiff-arming the other teams behind them and not lose any ground and stay out of the play-in. And this is just coming at a really bad spot for the Sixers right now, and for Paul George, actually, who got back in good faith, if you will, with Sixer fans after last season a little bit, especially after the game that he had, 32, 9 3-pointers that he had the other night. And now he's back in their doghouse for this and putting the team in a really, really difficult spot for what they have to go through. So with the lineup now looking like, hey, no more guesses of if it's going to be Kelly Oubre and Dominic Barlow starting. They're probably both starting next to Joel Embiid in that front court going forward. You need Quentin Grimes back, and you need him to be healthy, and you need Quentin Grimes' output as far as points off the bench to be much better than it has been because of this absence. Everybody has to now step up because of this.
So there are a few different ways to go. So like the trade stuff. One interesting thing here. So Giannis is the big fish who's out there. We've talked about him a lot the last few days. In any kind of deal where you were hoping to use Paul in a 3-team construct, so for the sake of argument, Paul to the Warriors, who the Warriors are looking for help, Giannis to Philly, whatever contracts need to go to Milwaukee. Now the Warriors, if they were to ever have had interest in that type of deal, they can't afford to trade for a guy who can't play for 25. Like, they need help now. They're a team that's like, They might not make the playoffs in the Western Conference. So teams that you might have been able to entice in some of these multi-team constructs, that's out the window. And I'm sure Golden State is probably gunning for Giannis on their own anyway. I think Brian Windhorst has suggested that maybe they're the favorite to go and get Giannis, which I'm not sure if I believe. So that's one thing. Second thing, Paul has been – I do agree with Derek. I think his bigger impact a lot of times has been on defense, just because the drop-off is pretty significant when you replace him with other guys. And you brought up Trendon Watford, Devon. But one of his really important roles this year is when VJ, for example, is running those backup units and their heavy bench groups, being able to have somebody out there with him who is a safety valve, or somebody who is going to initiate the offense. Sometimes you start these second and fourth quarters, and he'll go get you 6 points, 8 points to open the quarter, get you off to a good start, and let everybody else ease into the game. Now, this basically, they already should have been staggering Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey for every minute of the game. You almost cannot afford a single minute without one of those guys on the floor, because otherwise, and look, we love VJ on this show. We love everything he's brought to the team this year. You're asking him to do a whole hell of a lot if he's going to be a guy who just carries units without either one of those guys. So Nurse has to figure out his sub patterns in that way. That's a big deal. You really are going to need to get creation and offensive firepower from somewhere. Is it going to be Quentin Grimes finding his form? Is it going to be Jared McCain maybe building off of last week? He, nothing really to speak of in the previous game against Sacramento. So hopefully it's more like the Milwaukee and the end of the Charlotte game for him moving forward. But there are just different pieces of this that will impact different guys on the team, different lineups that have been working. They've been trying to work on, like they ran some Joel Embiid, Paul George pick and rolls early in that Sacramento game. They're trying to iterate because this team needs reps. They need time on the floor together. Now that's all out the window. You don't get any of that. You get him back March 25th, hopefully, as long as he's in shape and healthy. And who knows, he got injured in a workout during the summer. So that's assuming that he's going to get there healthy. And then you have to go into a final regular season sprint, potentially play in the play-in if you're fortunate enough to, keep yourselves afloat. This is now even more than usual riding on Joel Embiid staying healthy, which what a scary concept that is. Because if he's not healthy, you might as well throw the season away at that point.
And even when he is healthy, like a starting lineup of Kelly Oubre and Dominic Barlow isn't exactly the optimal spot to try to run that Embiid Maxey two-man game out of. It is going to be, he's really, Paul, irreplaceable on both sides of the floor. They don't have anyone who truly has his, how reliable of a defender he is, and they certainly don't have anyone who can provide that off-ball spacing and shooting. It sucks.
It does. I saw people jump in there asking what happened again. They saw something with Paul George. Paul George suspended for 25 games, violating the anti-drug league policy. 25 games suspended for Paul George. Wrong time. Never a good time. Definitely not the time now, with the Sixers right in the thick of things in the Eastern Conference playoff standing. Super chat from Skunk. Kyle, you want to get to the we got a suspended haiku.
Suspension haiku from Skunk, who says,
exactly.
The haiku is titled puking emoji. Paul George, Chris Webber, Andrew Bynum, or Ruland. Who's most annoying?
Bynum thinks it was really bad. That was really, for a different reason, but it was really bad.
They were all bad. They all annoy me. How about that? I'm not power ranking them. All these guys for different reasons piss me off. So,
Mark Jackson just jumping in, man. I feel so bad for Nick Nurse. He hasn't been dealt a solid hand yet with this basketball team. Thanks for the super chat, Mark, for Nick Nurse. Well, this is where the creativity of the head coach comes in, because you talk about the rotations, Kyle. But Derek, as you mentioned, with the Paul George, Kelly Oubre, and Dominic Barlow are not Paul George when it comes to the release valve that, hey, I got to get the ball out of my hands. The double team is here. I can count on Paul George to at least shoot a decent percentage from three. Bounce back year for him from behind the three-point line. And what offense, though, does he change it up a little bit? How do they maybe adjust things on the fly where there have been games already where George has not played, so maybe they've had to do things differently? Are we going to see a lot more of a different type of offense from Nick Nurse because he's going to be without George for 25 games? It's going to be Oubre, Barlow, Grimes, others, of course, VJ Edgecombe. Where does Nick Nurse now decide to go with the offense? Does he change much at all? Does he just keep it what it is, and you just hope guys react the right way when the ball's in their hands?
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. I think this is one thing where Kelly over the last 4 or so games has struggled from the perimeter a bit. He's shooting like 18% over the last 4. He's shooting well in the season, so I don't want to read too much into small sample, but this is like, that shooting has to be real. You can't have 2 complete non-shooters on the court like Kelly has been in prior years. He's, like I said, pretty consistent so far this year, more consistent than I thought he would be, but the onus on that is very, very high that is real. I'm not sure.
Also, Derek, is just the volume too, because when we talked about it post game the other night, he was the 4th, 5th option, and the shots weren't there for he or VJ Edgecombe. So the flow wasn't there. The touches weren't there. And now he's probably going to be at least the 3rd, and see how VJ plays out in a specific game, and then the 4th option. So maybe with more touches, again, that feel for the basketball, more involved, maybe it's a little bit different for what we've been accustomed to seeing all year.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's going to have a little less space because Paul's not on the floor. He's going to be defended by a little bit of a tougher defender because Paul's not on the floor. He's going to be relied upon. So some of the shots that he is now able to turn down, and quite frankly, I think he's done a pretty good job of turning down, semi-contested shots. He might feel a little more of an urge to fire away because he's relied upon a little bit more. This is not great. That's all I keep going back to. It's not great, Bob.
There is a small part of it that's funny to me. Not funny for the team or the fans or for us having to cover this clown car of a franchise. But I just love the idea of the NBA's drug czar watching Sixers Bucks the other night, watching Paul George go off and being like,
that ain't
guy,
right.
get him in here now.
Hey,
we need a cup of urine.
Listen,
immediately.
How about the players always tweet out after they have a bad game? Of course, they ask me right now, right? And we didn't get that tweet from Paul George on that night, but they always do tweet it out. It's the right time when it happens. So Paul George suspended for 25 games, according to Shams, and his quote, as Kyle read out at the top of the show, if anybody did mention the quote statement from Paul George: over the past few years, I've discussed the importance of mental health. And in the course of recently seeking treatment for an issue of my own, I made the mistake of taking an improper medication. I take full responsibility for my actions and apologize to the Sixers organization, my teammates, and the Philly fans for my poor decision-making during the process. I am focused on using this time to make sure that my mind and body are in the best condition to help the team when I return. And as Kyle pointed out, that's somewhere around March 25th against the Chicago Bulls. And then we'll see where the Sixers are at that time. Not great at any time, but certainly not a great spot right now for George and the Sixers, as the trade deadline is right in front of us, and the Sixers are in the thick of things in the Eastern Conference as far as playoff seeding goes. So any last thoughts?
I like how Kyle takes the time and effort to count down 25 games exactly. And then Devon says it's somewhere around March 25th. Come on, give Kyle the credit.
It's the exact date. I know what I'm talking about. This is the stretch here, Devon.
He's on the games.
One quick thing. Speaking of specifics, I believe, based on some numbers that I have seen thrown out there, as we're talking about tax ducking and the potential to convert guys, they could, in theory, I believe, this is napkin math, dump 2 minimum contracts and convert Walker and Barlow and be under the tax line. That it would not necessarily, the easiest way is to dump Andre Drummond, but I think because of how much this just shaved off their bill. So, Derek, you are a resident tax ducking expert, so you can check me on this, but I think if they dump 2 minimums, they have a path. So, Coach Lowry, it's been nice knowing you.
Well, yeah. So let's say I don't want to get too deep into the math yet, but I think a rest of season contract at the deadline would be about $900K on the cap sheet. So you get rid of Lowry, you get rid of another minimum contract player, Gordon. And you have 2 900K slots slotted in there. Now, whether or not Barlow would take a minimum, he might want a little more than that, so it would get a little bit tougher. But yeah, it's pretty easy to, eventually might be bad news for Charles Bassey. Maybe you don't sign him to a second 10-day contract because you just convert Barlow and Walker. Those are your 14 players, and try to dump. Yeah, look, it's real easy for them now. Yay.
Hang the banner, Derek. We'll duck the tax again.
Hey, listen, you can't duck those games and get minutes played now for Jabari Walker because you need him. So get him out there on the floor. You're going to need him. Oh, sweet jump shot. I love this. Speaking my language. What's Ricky Council doing these days? Go get him, Rick.
Oh, no. I think really the big consequence of this is you have to decide, are we playing more traditional basketball or are we just going to sell out and play the heavy guard lineups? Because you don't have a path to playing real wings. Like maybe Justin has a stretch here where he plays well, but otherwise you have to decide, are we rolling Walker, Barlow, Watford and playing them more minutes, or are you getting on your knees and praying that McCain and Grimes turn it around here and you just win through offense? Like, I think that's probably going to be the night-to-night calculus Nick Nurse has to go through.
Yep. Well, a lot more to cover with this basketball team and this story with Paul George. We'll be back to I misspoke. Game time is 7:30. It's the reunion game for the 2000-2001 Sixers championship appearing team, the finals appearing team, with the guys back in the building tonight. Kyle will be in the building tonight, getting all the info there and keeping us up on things what's going on there. But first game without Paul George now because of this 25-game suspension. So 7 o'clock pregame, me, Derek, and Bree, all of you, make sure you tune in for the latest of the Sixers because, as we have now trademarked, it's always something with this Philadelphia situation. All right, that'll do it for Derek, Kyle, and Bree. I'm Devon. We'll be back tonight, 7 o'clock, for the pregame show. Sixers and Pelicans going for another win for another team that you should, even with Paul George out of the lineup, you should beat them, especially with the Pelicans on the second night of a back-to-back, having played the full game last night. So we'll talk to you then. We have been presented by Xfinity. Make sure you check out Xfinity.com for the latest. Make sure you watch us and everything in 4Q, courtesy of Xfinity. Everybody,
imagine that.
Imagine that. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We'll see you tonight at 7 o'clock right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
We all silly like the mayor.